Welcome to another episode of Well-Adjusted Mama. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Brayton, and I created this podcast in 2014 to empower and educate women through the perinatal phase of their life on wellness, lifestyle, and holistic health. Today's guest is Lisa Greaves Taylor, and we speak about the topic of gathering your optimal birth team. Lisa Greaves Taylor is the founder of Birth Matters NYC and has been working with New York City-area birthing families since 2010 as a childbirth educator, birth doula, and lactation counselor. She teaches group and private childbirth classes in person in Astoria Queens, virtual live classes, and also offers an online on-demand version of her comprehensive course. She's certified with Lamaze International, Childbirth Education Association of Metropolitan, New York, Evidence-Based Birth, and DONA International. She's served on the board and a task force for two of those organizations. In 2019, Lisa started the Birth Matters podcast, which I highly recommend, where she shares mostly New York City-based birth and fertility journey stories along with childbirth ed commentary. In 2021, she became the director of East River Doula Collective with the goal of providing a more comprehensive offering of support to birthing families through doula support and support groups. She's devoted to helping equip birthing people with best current evidence, strategic and coping tools, and self-advocacy strategies towards safer, more empowering, and positive journeys into parenthood. Lisa is particularly passionate about advocating for change in birthing and postpartum outcomes for underserved or more marginalized populations. You can find out more at her website, Birth Matters. Hi, Lisa. Welcome to the show. I'm very excited to have you on today.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Laura. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so today is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, and it's something that I've brought up in multiple previous podcast episodes because I just think it can't be understated, and that's gathering your optimal birth team. So this is something that I don't know if it's completely mainstream yet, but it's something that is gaining more awareness and acceptance, and women are like choosing to actually create this village around themselves with really carefully hand-selected birth team members, right? So let's just start off with talking a little bit about who you are, and we'll go from there.
Great. So I'm Lisa Greaves Taylor. I have been doing birth work for about 12 years. So I am a mom of two. I have a 14-year-old and an almost 17-year-old. He'll be 17 next month. And on the other side of birth, I just really caught the birth bug, so to speak. I became really passionate about wanting to help other people have better births than I felt like I was hearing all around me. And it started with my first pregnancy, going to birth class and having my eyes opened to a lot of the challenges that we face in our maternal healthcare system. That's getting a lot more press these days than it was back when I was pregnant with either of my little ones. But, now for those who haven't read or heard, we are ranking at the bottom of the developed nations of the world. And things aren't getting better so far. They're getting worse in our outcomes for birthing parents, and also not great for babies either. So we have a lot of work to do. That's one of the pieces that made me really passionate about doing this work. But also, I just really had my eyes open to a greater degree to how natural of a healthy physiological process this is for the vast majority of people. We have uncomplicated, healthy pregnancies, and our culture does us a disservice in the cultural narrative that is so predominant in movies and TV and here in the US and in other countries too. But since I grew up here, this is what I can speak most readily about. It's perceived as this really scary thing, this really thing that we're supposed to be afraid of, and we need to be afraid of the pain. And so much of the work that I do is really shifting that cultural narrative, helping people to build their confidence, to help us to be able to just relax into things and trust the process and trust our little active participant babies in the process, because they are active participants in their own births. And I think that's a really cool thing to remind ourselves of. So, anyway, I could go on all day about that, but that's how I came to this work. And so I pursued certification initially as a doula, a birth doula, as well as a childbirth educator. And so I've been doing both of those things for about 12 years now. And then, over time have added different other things like lactation support counselor and evidence-based birth instructor and lots of things. I'm a lifelong learner, so always diving into continuing ed things. Does that answer your question?
Yes. And I really appreciate you and I share a passion for shifting this narrative around birth, especially in the US, which is where we're located, especially the New York area, right? Because, why the hell is the United States last? Can you speak a little bit to that statistic?
Oh, wow. It's such a big question. It is so hard to boil it down, but there are so many layers in our maternal healthcare system that just create problems, unfortunately. There is liability. We live in a litigious environment. There is the fact I was just listening to, maybe it was one of your podcasts. I'm trying to remember where I was. No, it was the Birth Healing Summit I've been going through with Lynn Schulte in the last week or so. And someone brought up the fact that, in medical school, for example, OBs really have to go through this hazing, and they so don't have any power that sometimes there's this tendency, because they've been through so much coming out of medical school, to kind of wield power because, it's human nature. If we've felt out of control, there can be this tendency to start to want to feel like we have some sense of control. And so there can be that. There can be so much trauma that our care providers go through the years of, especially in COVID times, but not limited to that. There is horizontal violence within the healthcare system. There are all these pressures on them. So, many of our care providers are burned out and just want to go home, just want to be with their families. Like, my heart goes out to them, because it is not an easy profession.
Right. There's a really poor balance of work life, right?
Absolutely, for sure. That's one of many, many ways we need to improve. And gosh, those are just, there's so many other things. There's an over-reliance on technology and medications. And, we want to save lives, but sometimes we go too far in that direction, and start to not trust a birthing person's body. We have intuition. We have so much wisdom within us that, just with all of these layers of the system, and specifically I'm talking about a hospital system, it has a tendency to create some issues. And then, there's the history of midwifery care, and midwives really truly are an ideal care provider for someone who's had a healthy pregnancy. And yet our history of that, and shaming midwives and saying they're awful, is that's shameful. It should not be that way. We should be working together. We should have these partnerships, with midwives being the standard of care. And then if and when someone might have a medical complication, yes, we're thankful we have an OB to interface with and to shift to as needed. But OBs are by nature and training surgeons.
Surgeons, correct.
Yeah.
They're not trained on what a natural birth looks like. And by the way, when I say natural birth, I still sometimes get shocked. People think that means a vaginal birth, which it does not. So recognizing that when I use the word natural birth, it does mean that there's no medications, there's no interventions. It's literally hands off, birthing mom doing her thing and baby, right, together as a team, and creating birth without the need from an exterior outside force.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just want to mention that I am in full support of whatever someone's very personal choices are and their personal preferences. And that may, for many, it may include pain medications. And I think we do need to support people's preferences and choices, because that's part of what creates an empowering, healthy experience and really protects someone's mental health, feeling heard, feeling supported, which is what we're going to be talking about today, is assembling that wonderful gathering, that optimal birth team, because that is such a key toward a satisfying and safe birth experiences, is having that support around you. One thing we don't think about a lot of times in our culture is the experience itself of giving birth, and how important it is to protect not just the physical health of the birthing parent and the baby, but also to protect the mental health and the wellness, and protect this experience, because this is a rite of passage. It is one of the biggest life transitions you'll ever go through. And I heard a story a few years back about a woman who had Alzheimer's, and as her memories left her, the one experience that stayed with her was her experience of giving birth. And so to me, that's not going to be true for everyone, of course, but I mean, for most of us, I would dare say this is one of the most memorable life experiences. So how important is that? How much more important is it, therefore, to really, really think carefully, mindfully, intentionally about the choices you're making and about the support around you?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Well said. I mean, I can definitely say from my own personal experience, it was the most, amazing, monumental experience of my life, giving birth to my son, Finley, 4.5 years ago. And, it's like the high that I was on. And I remember talking to another mom in my practice who had given birth a couple of years prior, had a beautiful home birth. And she's like, man, I would give birth every day. I saw her like 2 days after she gave birth, and she was still on that high, on top of that mountain, just floating from that birth. And I experienced that as well. I was like, wow, this is like the most powerful drug, right? Made within my body internally, that, and how, and, empowering, the word power there was like capitalized, right? It was just like, I can do anything. And what we find is when women have an empowered birth, which to your point could include a medication, right? Or a hospital location as opposed to a home, right? These are all personal decisions, but when that woman has created that birth plan from information, education, and really lined up what she's looking to create for her birth, and then and does create it based off of that plan, she will now be set up for, even I feel like, more of a successful parenting, motherhood, in making decisions now for her family, because she's that mama bear that is like, I know what I'm doing. I'm not here to get swayed by everyone around me who's giving me information that is possibly fear-based or unscientific or whatever. And it's not what's in the best interest for her and her family. And she can learn to block that out and just focus. Where do I want this positive, valuable, information to be coming from, So that's so important. So for women that are craving that information and recognize that they're not necessarily getting it at their OBGYN office, where are some great resources for them?
Yeah, well, I would love to actually kind of compare and contrast the sort of the chronological way that people assemble their birth teams versus what I think is a more ideal kind of order, if that's okay with you.
Oh, yeah, that sounds great.
So usually we pick our care provider first, right? And the reason why I want to explain this is because time and time again, we I find that my clients are kind of scrambling at the very end of pregnancy because they've been told to do things in a certain order and save birth class and save hiring a doula, if you're even going to think about that, until the very last minute at the end of pregnancy. And then people are stressed. And they realize as they're learning more at the very end of pregnancy, they start to realize, oh no, I have some red flags about my care provider. Or also, I heard a colleague of mine call it pink flags. You start to feel like your intuition's telling you like something's not quite right. Like I'm not feeling fully aligned with this care provider. And when I say care provider, of course, I'm talking about OB or midwife. And those pink flags are going to turn into red flags. So please listen to your intuition. That's like one of the first things. But then also, instead of saving birth class and doula till later in pregnancy or opting out altogether of one or both of those things, really consider educating yourself way earlier, because how can you know what you prefer in birth and who the heck is a good care provider for you, a well-aligned care provider for you, if you don't know any of that stuff? If someone were to hand you a birth plan with a whole bunch of like preferences on it, most people at the, for most of pregnancy will be like, what the heck are these things? What's delayed cord clamping? What's episiotomy? I have no idea what any of these are. So how could I, we're so far from having any idea what we want. And there are multiple ways you can educate yourself. One thing I love to suggest that's maybe less obvious than reading a book, which I will recommend one that my local colleague wrote. I'll go ahead and say it now. Your Birth Plan by Megan Davidson is an excellent book that can really, if you want to start reading that earlier in pregnancy, can really help you to develop and hone your birth preferences for various scenarios, for a spontaneous labor, for an induction, for a cesarean, if that becomes necessary. So in addition to that, you could also consider taking a birth class earlier. You could consult with a
earlier,
doula.
Meaning how early are we talking?
Great question. As earlier in the second trimester as possible. You could even, in the first trimester, you could consult with a doula. Doulas give free consultations, interviews.
Yeah.
And so you could always interview someone, because here's the thing, doulas work in our local hospitals and our birthing centers if we hardly have any of those, but, and home births. And they're going to know so many care providers. And, especially if someone is hoping for an unmedicated birth, they're going to really help you hone in on who are the care providers and what are the birth environments that are going to be most supportive of that particular scenario, but not limited to that. That I say that because that is harder to find than if someone is just hoping for a pretty standard epidural birth. But even then, even for anyone who wants pain medication, great. You still want to have a care provider who's going to be respectful of you and unrushed and help you feel heard, because we see that is the biggest key to a satisfying birth, to one that where someone has a positive experience about it, is feeling like they had people who heard their voice in labor and respected them. And so those consultations are so eye-opening and informative, and I cannot recommend that highly enough. And it's not like you have to, it's no commitment. Those consultations, you can decide, I'm going to consult with some of these doulas or a birth consultant. So some childbirth educators will also do like birth consultations, maybe for a fee. Or you could take the full birth class. There are a lot of several different options here. But I forgot to mention earlier that I am the director of the East River Doula Collective. So that's a new role I took on in the past year. So we have birth doulas and postpartum doulas, as well as a fertility doula for anyone who's trying to conceive on that. Yeah. So that's something where people feel so isolated because often they're not sharing their, what path they're on. And it can be so helpful to have someone help them navigate that, both physically and emotionally. So we're here for that. There are many other great collectives and agencies and sources, places to find doulas, many of which I have on my website. So we're always happy to help with that. But doulas, yes, go ahead.
I wanted to back up a second. So I really appreciated, and I wanted to just emphasize something you just brought up as we're talking about the first members of this optimal birth team. You said birth consultant, and I had to even think for a second about what that was. And it's not certainly like, doula and a birth provider and certainly childbirth educator even are common sense members of the birth team, as well as a maternity chiropractor, by the way. We haven't gotten there yet.
Oh, yes. But, definitely part of the optimal team.
I was thinking about that, like, for a woman, and like, this is really, we're really talking about a first-time mom. I think, sadly, women that have experienced birth already and had suboptimal birth experiences then realize, I don't want that. And then certainly are going to be choosing what's on the other side of it. Right. Mm-hmm. But we don't want, ideally, any woman to have to go through this type of trauma, so to speak, physically and or emotionally, in order to have them understand what they actually want and be clear about that clarity about what is a good fit for their birth. So for women that have never given birth and are now finding themselves pregnant or preconception, right, and planning pregnancy soon, a birth consultant is a wonderful way to learn. And like you said, reading the birth plan book, your birth plan as well, learning what all these options are. So then you can really digest all of this. And you don't want to do this in the third trimester. That is not the optimal time to start making these decisions. And so you can do them while you're even preconception. You can start meditating, thinking, reading resources, talking to birth consultants, and then start executing these decisions once you're pregnant, even in the first trimester. Like, you can certainly interview birth providers in that first trimester, right? So the sooner the better. Pink flags are important. I really appreciate you bringing that up. And the challenge, and I do see this as well in my practice, when a woman sees a pink flag and now she's like at the end of her pregnancy, she's a little stuck about like, oh, she can, fingers crossed. I hope that this birth works out. But they'll share it with me. My birth provider, my OB said this to me, and it didn't sit well, right? Like the tone or the phrase or something was like, oh, that's not. It's almost like a Jekyll and Hyde. Like, that's not the person I met at the beginning of my pregnancy, right? Or this is my OBGYN that I've had for 10 years. And so I like her, right? And she's a great person and she's been a great gynecologist, but recognizing that's not the same as somebody who's going to be delivering your baby as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So birth consultant, I can just think of one in New Jersey, Jane Freeman, as a childbirth educator,
she's
postpartum
a colleague
doula.
Of mine. Yeah.
She's amazing. And she offers that service. And that is somebody that you could work with preconception first, early second trimester. The earlier, the better. I think that's the big emphasis we want to say here, because then you're really setting yourself up for success and you're not scrambling. Nobody wants to scramble at the end of their pregnancy. That's when you're slowing down, you're preparing for this monumentous event. And it doesn't need to feel like, fight or flight, like, oh my God, what am I going to do? We want to try to minimize that type of experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Megan Davidson, who wrote Your Birth Plan, also does birth consults. I do them. So that is a harder role to find. Not as many people offer that, but that's why I just say, well, just meeting with a doula is going to give you a lot of that.
Yes,
those considerations.
And other like my practice, we have a lot of resources as well. So we are like, here's a list of doulas, here's a list of childbirth educators. I love the fact you're talking about doing a childbirth class even before the third trimester, which is going to be very different than what you'll see like a hospital childbirth class. Like, you're talking like independent, and those classes tend to be much more evidence-based, I would say, and more full of choices and options instead of this kind of narrow, this is how the hospital wants you to give birth type of,
right.
This is what we want to create. But
these are our protocols.
These are our protocols. This is where you're restricted. It's like
which has its own
guidelines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that does hold its own value. And I've had clients who have taken both their hospital class and my class. Or another interesting combination, really nice combination, is to take a really evidence-based comprehensive class and then maybe take a method class such as hypnobirthing class.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to be quite different, but very complementary. So
yes. And I think the bottom line is, it's like, in a lot of ways, the more information, the better, I guess, without making it too overwhelming. But just really, there's an excitement. Like, you and I both love to learn, and we're lifelong learners. And I think when it comes to something like this, ideally, every woman, they're excited about their pregnancy. They're excited to meet their baby. And there can be a lot of excitement and hope and joy around the birth as well, and recognizing that the decisions you make during preconception and during the pregnancy will really impact the birth. They're directly connected. Absolutely.
I just want to say one clarifying thing about when I'm saying take birth class early. I'm sure many people are dismissing that recommendation because the very predominant argument for taking it later is, well, I want it to be fresh on my mind. And that's why I'm constantly, in the 12 years of doing this work, I'm like, how can we help people to learn things earlier? How can we meet them where they are in preconception, like you were saying, Dr. Laura? So I created an online course so that I think a really ideal kind of combo is to take your live birth class early in pregnancy, and like as early in the second trimester as possible. You could take it earlier if you wanted to, than that even. And then you have the online course on demand, and you can just go use that to go back and review anything that you're feeling like, I'm not really remembering those hands-on comfort measures. Let me go back through those lessons, those to refresh. So it's not like you have to choose one or the other, depending on who your childbirth educator is, because many don't have a recorded version. But increasingly, especially in the times of the pandemic, we are seeing many more people create that offering. So that's just one thing I wanted to point out in case people just stopped listening when I said take birth class really early.
Yeah. And I think to your point, some families are even taking more than one, or to your point, it could be an in-person group class. It could be a private class. And then there could be an online program, right? Which is the content and, even, reading books, like I love anything from Ina May Gaskin. So just reading books like that, those, even though they're not technically childbirth classes, they do talk a lot about childbirth.
Oh yeah. Educational and birth stories too.
And then reading and hearing positive birth stories. So those are all just feeding your mind with what's available. And, you're going to resonate with some things and you're not going to resonate with other things. But the more that you can see what your options are, then you can really make a conscious decision of what feels right for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you were just mentioning positive birth stories. If it's okay, I'll plug my podcast. As well as others, there are many wonderful birth story podcasts, but so the Birth Matters podcast is my podcast. And I started that because I wanted to give my clients and other New York City area birthing families more positive birth stories in our local birth environment, and kind of fill in some of the educational gaps that we only have so much time in birth class. So, and storytelling is such a powerful way to learn and to process these rites of passage, so yeah, the Birth Matters podcast shares mostly New York City birth stories and fertility journey stories. And that's another way to learn earlier in pregnancy if you're not quite ready to, whether or not you're ready to take birth class earlier on.
Yes, exactly. So books, podcasts, there's, I feel like there's support groups like it's pregnancy, like you can go when you're pregnant, before you're not just the new mom support groups, I think are quite mainstream and common, but like even ones for pregnancy. So you can just start connecting with other women that are literally going through similar life experience the same time you are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one platform that I've heard really good things about, I mean, ideally finding your neighborhood support groups is so great because then you're really developing, in real life relationships and friendships. But particularly in the times of the pandemic, if people aren't comfortable being face to face yet, there's also this platform called Expectful.
Yes.
Are you familiar with it?
Yes, and it's like I interviewed the CEO on the podcast.
You did?
Oh
nice.
my God. Amazing.
I'll have to listen to that.
Yes.
Yeah. I've had so many rave reviews from my clients. I had been just recommending it, and I still do, for a meditation app that's like, customized for this time in life. But I went onto their website recently. I'm like, oh my gosh, they have all these like support group offerings. And it's just they're building it out to be a really wonderful resource, it seems.
Yes. I didn't even know they had that. When I spoke to her, this was probably a year ago, it's a fairly new app. They didn't have it when I was pregnant. And I know there was, meditations for fertility, meditations for pregnancy, impending upcoming birth, and then postpartum, breastfeeding, pumping. They have the whole library for perinatal women to give them support from a meditation perspective. But I know, the vision of the company is how can we empower and inspire women to have this amazing experience, because that's what every woman deserves.
Absolutely.
That's her birthright if she's choosing to become a mother. And how can we do that? And she did speak a little bit about the inequalities of maternal health based on race, and as a African American woman, and it was just pretty eye-opening for me to hear that this is like still happening. This is a real thing.
Oh yeah. It's a real big problem. So in terms of the birth team, other things to really think about, if you have a partner, thinking about like your existing support system and who might really be good support for you in the laboring process and the birthing process. If you have an intimate, committed partner, is that a good fit? Do you want them supporting you, and do they want to support you? It's not, it's kind of an assumption these days that your beloved, I always like to refer to them, will support you, but that shouldn't be a foregone conclusion. It's not right necessarily for all people. So just really thinking carefully about that and having those conversations,
having that communication earlier on. Yeah.
Absolutely.
My husband's like, I am not going to be doing these, double hip squeezes. He's like, that's why we have a birth doula. She's like, she can do that.
Yeah.
That was not in he's like, I don't want to catch the baby. That's what the midwife's going to do.
Yeah, we each have our roles, right? And so some partners are not comfortable being there at all. I find my clients who come to class usually are in it to support their beloved and really want to be equipped with all of those tools. But yeah, some of them are more ready to support, just to provide emotional support, but not the physical support, like you were saying with your partner. And it's different for everybody. So, I'm a big believer in professional doula support, although I don't, with hesitation, I say I want to put it out there. It's not for everybody, but I do think, generally speaking, we have good studies that prove that doula support improves outcomes, reduces cesareans, reduces the need for pain medications, it increases satisfaction, that kind of thing. And I also want to point out that partners, if you don't want to be replaced or in any way or in some ways, they're not there to replace you at all.
I think that's very important. Like my husband was like, yeah, let's get the doula because I know I can't do those things that you're wanting me to do. And that's what she'll do. But there are some, dads, partners that really want to be hands-on and are right there serving as a doula, right? Yeah. During the laboring woman's experience. And a doula, the dad is a doula, and a professional doula, both can still be helpful, during labor. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. I know that was challenging for some hospitals where they weren't allowing to support people in the room at a certain period. I feel like a lot of that's lifted now, hopefully.
Yes, mostly.
But that was, I mean, there are still a handful of hospitals. And that goes back to if you're currently pregnant and you want to have a doula and your partner in your room with you in a hospital, you want to confirm that that's not going to be an issue.
Yes. And I was just talking over the weekend with one of my clients who was like, my doctor's saying I can't bring a doula. So I've just ruled that out. I said, how many weeks are you? I'm forgetting right now. I think maybe she was like 32 weeks or so. I said, it could totally change by the time you go into labor. So keep checking back and maybe even check with the labor and delivery charge nurse, because sometimes a doctor or a midwife who works in a hospital may just have missed the memo that now they're allowing doulas again. Right. So maybe just good to double check on that and not just assume.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so thinking about like a mom or a sibling or a friend, someone else, if you're thinking about having them as a support person, be really, really careful, particularly with a parent, because it could be beautiful. That could be your perfect form of support. I know I wanted my mom there. I didn't want her hands-on, but I wanted her just there, her presence, because I knew that was going to calm me and help me remind me that I could do this. But there are sometimes our parents get really, even if they trust birth and normally are very peaceful in terms of their mentality surrounding birth, sometimes when it's their daughter, when it's their child, it can end up not being the most ideal fit. It can be very like anxiety producing, like because the birthing person is feeling the parent's anxiety, the mom's anxiety. So that's just something to really think through, because in our doula collective,
mother-in-law, right?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes. This is something we compare notes all the time in our WhatsApp group with our doula collective. We're in daily relationship with each other, comparing notes on what's going on in the hospitals and with the care providers and with our clients. And one of the recent conversations was about this tendency for moms to like need to be asked to leave the room because it's slowing down her labor because she's so scared, and that's not going to be every mom, of course. But it's just something to really think through very carefully, because you want to be sure that you can relax as much as possible, because we know that oxytocin, the most key hormone in this birthing process, creating the contractions, surges best in a place of relaxation. And when we can trust everyone around us and just kind of zen, dim lighting, all that good stuff. And that's a key reason why it's so important to assemble this birth team who is going to foster that relaxation in you and help you feel heard and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love that. And that makes so much sense. And, I think the other thing here I'm hearing is boundaries. So let's say, the birthing parent's mother is really like, I want to be at your birth, and it's like pushing. And if that does not feel in alignment to what her needs are, then she needs to say, Mom, I love you. And you can be right outside the room.
Healthy boundaries. Yeah. When I teach on postpartum wellness, because my birth series it's an all-in-one. It includes thorough birth prep for various scenarios, plus postpartum wellness, newborn care, feeding, breastfeeding, as well as pumping and bottle feeding. And the postpartum piece, I always am like, this is the best time to ask for help and establish healthy boundaries. And that goes for, like you're saying, Dr. Laura, before birth, as well as you're assembling your birth team and preparing for this transition into parenthood. Really important to just be firm with your boundaries. And I know that can be tough because some of the people around us, our parents and so forth, can be fairly like they have high hopes for certain things. But that's not who should have the say here. It should be the birthing mama.
That's right. So who else is part of this optimal birth team?
Well, I mean, I love chiropractic, body work, some kind of body work, chiropractic, pelvic PT, prenatal yoga, some amount of a little bit of strength training that's, of course, pregnancy appropriate. And particularly with regard to the transverse abs that are so important in pushing. Those are just a few of the many different practitioners who could be part of a really optimal massage for sure. Acupuncture. Yeah. I know I saw you have an acupuncturist in your office, don't you?
Yes. And a massage therapist.
Yes, that's right. Yes. So I love that you offer all of that.
And I would say a lot of women coming into my office pregnant do schedule with all those providers because they get different benefits from all of them, so it's nice to do different versions of body work too, and kind of rotate.
Absolutely. Yeah. And another resource that I just want to put out there for whatever it's worth is for earlier in pregnancy. As I've, done this work longer and longer, keep trying to think about how to meet people's needs, help them think about these things earlier. I came up with, it's called 11 Steps to an Amazing Birth, I believe is the name of it. I always forget the name of it. But it's just a free guide that helps you think through this. And part of that is the whole body work aspect and thinking through how can we strategically physically align our bodies and our whole neurological system in a way that's conducive to the best birth possible, as well as the healthiest journey into parenthood. Prevention is so much better than having to go back and repair injury and things. Definitely as a maternity chiropractor, I know that when a woman's pelvis is in alignment, that's going to directly impact baby's position, right? Optimally line up that baby. So it's like helping that basketball go through the hoop as effectively as possible and utilizing the musculoskeletal system with the nerves, the muscles, and joints. So they're all functioning in harmony. And the pelvic floor is opening. And to your point, the transverse muscle I do Tupler technique as well. So just really having that awareness that having, a strong core that is not having this huge separation or diastasis recti will also directly not only impact baby's position, but also the birth. It's huge game changer kind of stuff.
And the position you're in when you're delivering the baby as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Right before we hopped onto this call, I took a class with a pelvic PT, and she was talking about coccyx pain, and of course went into like labor positions and birthing positions, and just the resounding theme you hear is stay off your back if you can in the pushing stage.
Yes, for so many reasons. Number one, it's extremely painful, because all of those sacral plexus nerves are right there and they don't like to be compressed. And let's bring gravity. Gravity's our friend. Like, let's help gravity move that baby down the birth canal.
For sure.
Yeah.
I did want to just add, people don't usually think about this as part of the birth team considerations, but just a couple for those giving birth in a hospital environment, just a couple of quick words I would love to say on nurses, residents, interns. Most states, so you'll be assigned a nurse if you're giving birth in a hospital. And that nurse may change depending on how long you're there. And you may have more than one nurse in the pushing stage. But I just want to mention, for what it's worth, that I encourage expectant parents to know their rights. So they're aware that they do have rights in this whole process, and they can decline almost anything. Say yes, provide informed consent or informed refusal. And with regard to a nurse, if you're assigned a nurse that you feel like you're just not jiving with, you're just feeling like this is not a good fit, you absolutely can have your doula or your partner go out, maybe be discreet about it, to the nurse's station and talk to the head nurse about, or the nurse coordinator, whatever their title might be called, to ask, is there a possibility for trading out? New York, I don't know about New Jersey, but probably we have the patient bill of rights. And that's one of the things is you do have the right to request a different doctor or a midwife or a nurse. And here in the New York area, most of our hospitals are teaching hospitals. So it's almost impossible to not give birth at a teaching hospital. So residents and interns are going to be coming in, and it often, especially in the pushing stage, can feel like a big crowd. And we know, you and I both know, Dr. Laura, that the hormones of labor require privacy, feeling a sense of privacy. And so more people watching you is not only does it feel uncomfortable, it's just not going to help the birthing process go as well as possible. So just know that you have the right to talk with your care provider about, I would prefer to not have any residents or interns in the room at all, or if you're okay with them being in the room, but you don't want them to be hands-on, that's another thing you could request. And usually they come on board around July 1st. And so especially for people giving birth in those July, August months, I'm especially intentional with pointing that out in birth class.
Oh, wow.
When they're fresh
they don't
on
even
board.
know what they're doing yet.
Yeah. Well, residents do more than interns, but yeah, I mean, like, who wants to feel like a guinea pig, right? I'm not most of us or any of us probably. So, and I get it. It's a teaching hospital. Everybody has to learn, but most people don't know to make that request. So let them practice on other people if you don't want to feel like you're being practiced on.
Or give birth at home.
Right. Give birth at home or a birthing center. Yes, absolutely. If you're comfortable with that, if that's where you will feel safe, once you educate yourself and learn about all these different principles that can help us figure that out. Again, Lisa, early on.
Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned, because I have heard that before. Like, part of it is it could be the nurse's last shift, like her last day, right? So she's already mentally checked out, or there's something going on in her, like we're all humans, right? There's something going on in her personal life. She's in a bad mood. She's stressed out. She's exhausted, or you just have a personality conflict, right? Which Absolutely. This is also human nature.
It can happen.
And you've never met this person before. You don't get to pick the nurse when you show up to give birth in a hospital.
Right.
So if that does happen and it doesn't, for whatever reason, doesn't feel like this person is there to support you fully and achieving the optimal birth experience that you want, advocating for yourself, and that could be, like you said, through a partner or a doula, is very important, because it can really shift the type of birth that woman has.
Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Do you have any last thoughts that you want to share with the audience?
Start early, educate yourself, equip yourself, just to echo the things we've already been talking about. Really mindfully approach this as early as you can. In the preconception stage, that's like, it's never too early to start that process. Because the choice of your support team, and especially your care provider, is one of the most important choices you can make toward a really positive, healthy, empowering birth experience.
It really is. I just launched my preconception online program, Brayton Birth Method, and a lot is about not only the preparing yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually for this upcoming conception and having a conscious conception, but it's recognizing that you can, being empowered will really help you navigate these types of decisions that you want to really know, earlier rather than later.
For sure.
Yeah, it's so important. Mm-hmm. Well, wonderful. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the show today. And this was a great conversation.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Dr. Laura.
Well, I had such an amazing time connecting with Lisa. Her and I are definitely kindred spirits in our passion regarding empowering women during the pregnancy and birth process. And I highly recommend checking out her website, birthmattersnyc.com, as well as her podcast, Birth Matters, to really inspire, educate, and fill your heads with positive birth stories, because those are so important to listen to and read as you're preparing for your own upcoming birth. And lastly, I wanted to give a shout out to Good Pods, an award-winning podcast app that is all about connecting people with some of the best podcasts and episodes out there. please check it out. And when you're on there, follow me at Well Adjusted Mama, and then we can share our favorite podcast episodes together.